Okay, we're going to be looking at lesson 3.1 today, and we're going to work on today just graphing linear equations, okay? And linear means line, okay? So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to graph by making a table. Now there's lots of ways to graph. You can graph by making a table, you can do intercepts, and then you can also do graph by y equals mx plus b or slope-intercept form, okay? And we're going to work on all three, but for today we're going to all be working on making a table. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is let's define what a linear equation is. All right, a linear equation, so if you look right here, this guy right here is telling you exactly what it is. It's a line. Okay, so linear equation is just an equation of a line. Okay, all right, and on the first example, it says graph by making a table. So we're going to set up our table here. And we're going to have three kind of columns, the middle one being bigger. So we're going to have an X column and we're going to have a Y column. That's going to be our coordinate point. So these two will make up what we're going to graph. And in the middle here, this is where we're going to put our equation, y equals negative 3x plus 2. And this right here, this guy right here, is going to be like our working column. This is where we're going to be showing our work. Okay? All right, now we are all going to be using the same numbers over in this column for right now. And that is going to be, it's going to be negative 2, 0, and 2. Now you really only need to plug in two numbers to graph a line, but I want to plug in 3 just to make sure that we didn't make a math error somewhere. Okay, so now everybody's using negative 2, 0, and 2. That's non-negotiable. We're all going to use the same thing. That way it's easier for when we grade. All right, so I'm going to take, and everywhere there's an x, I'm going to be plugging it into my x position. So y equals negative 3 times negative 2 plus 2. So negative 3 times negative 2 is 6. 6 plus 2 is 8. Okay, do the same thing now, but replace it with a 0. So now negative 3 times 0 is 0, plus 2 is 2. And on our last one here, we've got negative 3 times 2 plus 2. So negative 3 times 2 is negative 6, plus 2 is negative 4. Okay, so now we're going to come over and we're going to graph. We're going to start by graphing the first guy here, the negative 2, 8. So just understand that this is actually the coordinate point, negative 2, 8. I plug in a 0, I get out a 2, and then I plug in a 2 and get out a negative 4. So these guys right here, these columns make up our coordinate point. All right, so let's go over here. Negative 2, 8. Okay, so negative 2, and that'll be the very top guy right here. Negative 2, 8. Okay, put a point there. And then 0, 2 will be our next one. So 0 up 2. Let's put a point there. And our last one is going to be 2, negative 4. 2, negative 4. So 2 and then down 4. Okay. Now, I'm going to want you to make a nice, good, straight line here. I don't want to see any of this. That's not a line. Okay, so don't do that. Oh, come on, guy. He's not backing off, is he? All right, let's erase it real quick. Okay, so we're going to do nice, straight lines. Okay, and use a straight edge. I'm going to give you rulers on the test. Okay, test or quizzes, but do the best you can here. Get it nice and straight and down through those points. And then we will put arrows on the end because a line will go on forever. So that has to have arrows on the end to imply that it's going to keep going. All right, let's take a look at the next example here. Okay, now on this example, we're still going to make our columns, the 3 columns, but we have to solve for y here first. We have to get it by itself so that when we plug it in, it makes it easier. So to do that, we're going to start by subtracting the 2x over to the other side. So those cancel. So I have negative y. Don't forget that negative has to drop down. You can't just forget it. And then I have a negative 2x and a positive 2. Again, keep the signs in front of your numbers. Okay, so here was a negative 2, a positive 2 is right here, so I have a positive 2 here. And then my last step, divide everything by negative 1. So y equals 2x minus 1. All right, so now that we have that going, we're now going to make our table. Okay, we've got our x, we've got y equals 2x minus 1, and then we have our y column. Okay, again, -2, 0, and 2 needs to go in there. So now y equals 2 times -2 minus 1. So 2 times -2 is -4, minus 1 is -5. Oops. Y equals 2 times 0 minus 1, so we get out a -1. And then y equals 2 times 2, which is 4, minus 1 is 3. Okay? Now, you don't have to write out the coordinate points off to the side, but please, again, understand that this is saying -2, -5, 0, -1, and 2, 3. Okay? So that's what we're going to be graphing. So let's go over to our grid here. -2, -5. So -2, and then down 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. So right here. Okay, and then our next one was 0, -1. Okay, so 0, and then down 1. And then our third point was 2, up 3. Okay, now notice how my dots are nice, pretty, and lined up. If yours are not lined up, go back and relook at your work. You've made a mistake somewhere. These are lines, so all of them should be nice and straight. Again, nice long lines, arrows on the end. Get through all 3 points. Use a straight edge if you have to. Okay, you'll have one on test and quizzes. All right, so now let's go down to the next example here. Oh, next page. Okay, and so what this guy is saying here is he's actually saying that there are 0 x's involved, minus 1. It's kind of what that guy is saying. Okay, so when we make our table, we're still plugging in x is -2, 0, and 2. Okay, now I'm not actually going to use this guy. I'm going to take this guy off. I just want you to understand that that means there's no x values there. Okay, and so in the middle, I've got y equals -1. And then for my y values, I'm going to put my y column out to the side there. Okay, so here's our problem, is when I try to take the x's and plug them in, where do we plug them in at? There's nowhere for them to go. There's no position to plug in the number for x. So no matter what I want to plug in, my answer here will always be -1. So down my y columns, I have -1, -1, and -1, because it says y has to be -1. I don't have an option here. Those are that's going to be my answer. So now when I come over and graph, I'm going to do -2, -1. So -2, -1. And then I'm going to do 0, -1, and 2, -1. So this is going to give me a horizontal line. Okay? Horizontal line. So again, back that off there. So again, just kind of keep in mind, when you've got a y equals, you're just going to have to put the y values down the y column. There's nowhere to plug in. Okay, we also have another special case we're going to look at, is what happens when we have like x equals 3. Okay, so we're going to make our table still. All right, so I've got, oops, x equals 3, and I've got the y column. Now, here's a problem, is we have been wanting to put -2, 0, and 2 in here, but what is this guy actually saying? He is saying that x has to be 3. So we don't get the option of putting in whatever we want here. We're going to have to plug in 3, 3's, and 3. Okay, so now -2, 0, and 2, in this case, is just going to slide on over. There's going to be no work to be shown here. And we're just going to fill in this with the -2, 0, and 2. Okay, so again, we're just slid those values over into the y column. All right, so now let's go over here and let's make a graph and see what it looks like. So 3, -2. So 3, -2. 3, 0. And 3, 2. So in this case, we end up with a vertical line. Okay? And I guess it'll be the same thing back up here real quick. is technically we would not have any work in this area right here. Okay? All right, so now we're going to look down here in E, and what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video, and I want you to try E on your own for a few minutes, and then I want you to play and then see how much you got right. All right, so you should have hopefully already paused the video for a few seconds there. Try the problem on your own, so let's see how you did. First thing we're going to have to do is we're going to solve for y. So we're going to start by subtracting the x over to the other side. So those cancel. So 2y equals negative x plus 4. And then we're going to divide all sections by 2. So that cancels. We get y equals. Now there is technically, remember, a 1 in front here. So that is saying that there's a negative 1/2 x plus 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Okay. All right, so now let's set up our table here. And we've got x is going to be negative 2, 0, and 2. I've got y equals negative 1/2 x plus 2. And then I have my y values. Okay, so y equals negative 1/2 times negative 2 plus 2. Okay, so half of 2 is 1. A negative times a negative is a positive 1. So 1 plus 2 is 3. All right, so now negative 1/2 times 0 is just going to be 0. Plus 2 is 2. And then now I've got negative 1/2 times 2 plus 2. Well, again, half of 2 is 1. So it's a negative 1 plus 2, which is 1. And we're going to go over here now, and we're going to graph negative 2, 3, negative 2, 3. So let's get our grid here. Negative 2 up 3, 0, 2, and then 2, 1. And we're going to make a nice straight line there. All right, and that concludes our notes for lesson 3.1 on the tables.